Hello, class. This is part 3 of urban sketching. In this one, we're going to work on the shade, shadows, and some final touch-up. So this is kind of the 3 phases that I work in. Uh, Obviously, the first phase is the sketch itself, or the drawing. Second phase is doing the watercolor, and the last phase is the real the heart of it, because this is where I really add some contrast and some punch and get those colors to really pop. So let's dive into this. So I'm going to work real large so that you can see a little better. If I look at this photograph carefully, and this is something that you can adjust yourself. You don't have to go with this, but in this particular photograph, you can see where the recessed windows, see that dark shadow? Let me zoom way in on this. Okay. See the dark shadow right here? The windows recessed to give a building a three-dimensional quality. To create that illusion, you need the shadows. Without the shadows, it's going to kind of look flat. It may look nice, but it's going to be flat. So anytime there's a recess, these windows are set back away from the plane of the brick wall. That little edge on the brick is going to cast a little shadow. You can see that right here. See the curvature? Every one of those windows, you can see where it's, look how it's darker here than it is over here. The slight overhang on this roof line casts a shadow underneath it. See that shadow? And look at this shadow here. This little extension of the roof is casting a shadow. So therefore, I can tell that the sun is coming from, some kind of an angle high, but yet off. It's coming from off to the right. If the sun were on this side, the shadows would be reversed. This is very important, I think, to really setting your drawing apart and really getting some pop in those colors. And you can, if you look a little closer, you can even see, look at the shadow of the tree right here. You can tell the sun is coming from the right down, obviously. Okay. So we're going to capture most of that. You can even see the shadow of the flagpole and the flag right here. Okay. But mostly on the recessed windows is where I want to put those shadows. These little insets up here have shadows. This little detail work casts little shadows. Okay. And at this scale, you're not going to see any of the brick. I wouldn't even try to suggest the brick. It's just too small. If you start putting brick in here, it's going to look cartoony. So what I would probably do is use my marker, and I'm going to put that shadow that falls on the left-hand side. Now I've lost my marker. Where is it? This happens to me all the time when I'm on a roll here, because I lay things down on my table. But I've got my Sharpie, so I'll just use that. I've got another Statler, but it's the bigger size. Anyway, so I'm going to come in right here on each of these windows. The main thing with the shadow, one of the main things, that you're consistent. Keep the shadow on the correct side. See how it makes it start to pop already? Okay, another thing, underneath each of these windowsills, see the shadow underneath the windowsill? All I need is basically leave some of the windowsill showing in a shadow. Then I could do that on all of them. This little inset in the brickwork up here, just on the top and the bottom. See how that makes it look three-dimensional? And then also this area right across here, I'm going to put a line. I might darken that in with watercolor. Any larger areas, you probably want to use the watercolor. Let's go over here, a little shadow. Anywhere there's a window, you can do a little recess in there. This edge right here, now I want to pull out some of the edges, like on these columns, just to kind of bring out some of those lines. These columns are going to have a little shadow on that side. It can just be a quick line. And across here, this probably hangs over a little bit. So does the bottom of that awning. I'm going to suggest a few of those lines in there for that awning. Let's see where else. Up underneath here, I want a little bit darker line. This is in deep shadow. And let's see where else. I'm going to strengthen the sidewalk line just a little bit, just to get a little bit of a stronger base. These are just little details adding contrast. Now I watercolored these. These should have been left light. That little vertical, I didn't do that. So I'm going to put a shadow right there on the left side of that. You can do a little hatching. These larger shadows, small shadows like window insets, you can do with a black line. Larger shadows are going to be done with the pen. Some of these lines I can strengthen. See that? I just kind of pull that out a little bit. Strengthen that division between these two buildings. Maybe pull out a little bit of that bush. And just strengthening some of those lines. Okay, and then the last thing, my brush. How could I possibly lose the brush? It was laying, there it is. So I'm going to take some of the larger shadows. I'll show you in a second. So on that brick, I've got my brick color already mixed from the previous. I'm going to add a little bit of black to that. So let's try this, see what this looks like. Okay, that's good. So I want a shadow underneath these. Still a little bit too much paint. And on the sides of these, underneath there, let's darken that a little bit underneath there. On the edge of this building, let's put a shadow there. A little touch, a shadow. I don't know if you can see it or not, but look at the curtain. There's a shadow cast onto the curtain. Underneath this awning. And I think there's an overhang here. Anywhere where there's an overhang, you're going to create depth. There's a shadow for that thing underneath it. Okay, the last step, you know what? I'm going to darken this street just a little bit, this asphalt. A couple strokes. A shadow for the tree. Let's make that real dark up in there. And then a single stroke. Shadow for the lamp pole. And let's see what else. And now I'll take the charcoal, and I've lost, there it is. This will lightly, just a little bit of texture across the sidewalk. If I want to work this in a little bit darker up in here. Now my watercolor is still wet, but I think I would come back with this charcoal, darken that tree. Really accentuate some of those shadow areas. Add some black on the windows just to get some contrast. Just a little bit of the base of that bush. If you look at bushes, it's always very dark down near the bottom. Look how those touches of black really make it pop. And the shadows. I'm even gonna bring those out a little bit more right there. You've got a crossbar in those windows. Basically what you're seeing is the shadow of that crossbar. What you're doing on this last step is focusing on shadows. And this is where you really have to look. And after a while, you'll know where the shadows are supposed to go. And I'm just adding some different shades just to give that reflective quality to the glass. But those little spots of black where there's deep, deep shade and shadow. Remember, the smaller the shadow area, the darker it's going to look. Look how that black really makes that pop. Up underneath this tree, I want to keep that kind of jaggedy with the leaves, but dark up underneath there. And then, of course, our last step is the spatter, my favorite part. I'm done. What I usually do is I'll pick out a color like that red. Let's use that red. Let's see what we're going to get over here. I just kind of tap it against here. I'm going to do some, I'm going to see what I'm going to get first. I got too much color yet. The spatter kind of creates an illusion of little spots of detail. How about a little bit of black in the street? See what that does. You don't want too much color where you have these pronounced polka. You don't want it to look polka dot. And the higher up you go, the finer the dots are going to appear and not so polka dotty. I've got very little paint in there so I can control it. Okay. Normally I'll put in where it was, but I'll usually put in the date at least so I know when I did it. Okay, that's finished. Now my problem is I want to come back tomorrow and touch up, but the only touch up I do is I'll look at the photograph or the scene very closely and where do I have some areas that need to be dark. Get that flagpole nice and black. I need more of a shadow. I'm just going to use the charcoal pencil and bring a shadow out. I'm going to accentuate that shadow in the tree. But notice I left the curb white because I want to separate the sidewalk from the curb. You know, you can also just avoid using regular graphite pencils because they get shiny when you make them dark. Got a little bit of detail here I didn't put in. A few spots here and there, add a little bit of texture, but the spatter really helps. Okay, there's my finished sketch. Not gigantic. You know, if you want to go bigger, that's, you know, it's all, you got to play around with it, see what size you like to work at. That's the size I like to work at. I used to work a lot bigger, but I was too tempted to put in detail and it ended up ruining the drawings. This is just the right size for me because I can get in some little detail with the charcoal pencil and the tip of my brush, but basically it's all an illusion. Okay, so I hope this helps. You know, and a good exercise is to actually do a sketch, do a watercolor twice. The second time, or do a little thumbnail. You know, instead of this size, maybe your drawing is only, and I'm kind of just sketching it quick, you know, kind of a thing like this where it's just very, very small. Just to get the feel of it. You know, I might put in color about like this, and then some like this, and then come back with the black. I mean, this is basically a thumbnail. Just whoops, just to get the idea of what I'm working with. You know, this is probably a 2 or 3 minute sketch. Just a quick throw in some blue, throw in a street, and maybe I come back with a tree. But that's basically a thumbnail. My colors bled a little bit, but then I can kind of get an idea of what I'm working with. Okay, so that should do it.